Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. It's a bit dark, so hopefully people are awake.
Dark and bright from here. It's hard to see you.
So we're going to have a little chat, actually, about artificial intelligence. We're just going to pivot a little bit. Very, very pleased to welcome Dame Wendy Hall back to Jersey. She did lead the UK review on AI that was published just a couple of years ago. So be good to hear, Wendy, about artificial intelligence. I think everyone here is on their own journey to understand what it is. But how do you think it's going to change the future?
Unimaginably. I'm going to say something, pick up what David said. I famously told Tim Berners-Lee in 1991 that this new web thing wasn't going to go anywhere. So you don't trust anything I say. But the talk about the loss of jobs, yeah, short term there will be, but we can manage through that with retraining programs. And long term there'll be many more jobs because of AI, and it's going to change our world unimaginably. I hope largely for the better if we get it right, if we handle it right. Because with the thing about today's artificial intelligence has been around for 50, 60 years, and arguably we invented it in the UK with Alan Turing. But with the wave we're in at the moment is machine learning, deep learning, which works on training on data. And it's all about the fact we've got lots of data and very fast machines to process that data in ways that we human beings cannot do. So breakthroughs in health are just going to come thick and fast. Thick and fast. We will have cures and treatments for things that were unimaginable a few, decades ago. Transport, energy, sustainability. AI will help us manage our world better if we get the argument right, manage our resources better. So there is an amazing upside of harnessing AI. Oh no, you're going to ask me that in another question, sorry.
Well, I mean, you alluded to the importance of having vast amounts of data. So actually, we will be talking a little bit more about that later in terms of how to manage that. I mean, AI, very powerful technology. I think many people are just starting to grasp the implications, and you've talked about some of them. Every leading nation on the planet and all of the big tech companies are also scrambling to sort of develop a position in AI and demonstrate their leadership. So in your view, who are those AI superpowers of the world, be they countries or companies?
Well, the straight answer to that is easy. It's the US and China, without a doubt. Largely because of the US, its legacy and scale. In China, huge amounts of investment and scale. And the Chinese have declared that, we've got what is hopefully a short-term crisis going on in China, but the Chinese have declared they will be the top nation in AI in 2030, and I think because of the current president of the US, they will be, because the US is not investing. And in the same way, they still have the legacy of the fantastic research groups and systems and startups in the Valley and so on, but China's overtaking the US. So the big question for islands, big or small, is, or even continents like like Europe, is how you deal with that and how you manage to be a leader in the world and have an economy where you're not just servicing the US and China in this, because of AI is going to become so dominant. And that was why I was asked to do the AI review. There were several. Well, I got a phone call from number 10. It was in February 2017. So Theresa May's trying to find her way through the post-referendum issues, and she'd just come back from Davos, and that year they were talking about the fourth industrial revolution, and it was like, well, what is the UK going to do? And in the world of AI, and the strengths we have, which you pick up on here, we have fabulous universities in the UK. We bat above our weight in terms of universities: Oxford, Cambridge, Manchester, Edinburgh, UCL, Southampton. And a legacy in AI in particular, we have very strong research groups. And we have also a fabulous tech startup culture. We have the best tech startup culture in Europe, easily. We have twice as many startups in the UK as the rest of Europe put together. We've got to be careful what I say about this, but I won't say any more than that. But there are some countries hate us saying that. But we do, and governments over time have invested in this. Both the Labour government and the Tory government have invested in this startup culture. And we can build on that. Our problem is we don't scale, right? We don't have the scale, just the number of people that you can make a business in your own culture, in your own region, in your own world. You've got to go global to do that.
Right.
So that's that. There are all sorts of nuances around that, but.
And in terms of the U.S. and China, I mean, I think we're familiar that in China there are entities like Baidu and Tencent and Alibaba, and they are companies, but actually in China, everything is really quite closely linked to the States.
No, I don't think of it like that.
Okay.
I'm writing a book about this at the moment. It's called The Four Internets, and be out sometime later this year. Those companies in China do amazing things, and everything you have in Silicon Valley, I could talk to you forever about how the different companies have grown and why we have one search engine and one shop and one, but they have the same companies in China, and they do the same things, and the Chinese use the internet more than we do, and in fact they've become a cashless society. We were talking about this last night, how hard it is to use cash or credit card in China if you're not Chinese. You have no way of paying for things. The key thing about the difference is that the government can look at any of the data, right? And I could talk at length about how there are some advantages to that, but there are advantages we wouldn't want to contemplate, because it destroys freedom of speech, freedom of the press. But in some ways they can subtly, or not so subtly, encourage better behaviour on social media, and which in ways that we are now really struggling with an open net, and people doing horrible things on it, and finding ways to police that when you're actually dealing with huge companies in other countries is really difficult.
And that's in contrast to other places like the United States, where you also have large tech companies. And it's more difficult for government to peer in and look at the data.
Yeah.
Right. So and then as you've already alluded to, there are places like the EU, which are really focused on
this is what we
protecting
talk
privacy.
about in our book. The paper was the geopolitics of the fragmentation of the internet, because the diversity of the internet, because actually it's all about how the data's governed. In the US, they do worry about data protection, data privacy. They haven't, but effectively the companies lobby. It's very market-led. They've got the big companies. They lobby Washington to get the laws they want. So net neutrality, for example. It depends which colour of government it's in, but the companies will lobby to get what they want to make their companies more profitable. It's all about, making, and that's nothing wrong with that. That's what companies should do. In Europe, they've gone totally data protection with GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. The Europeans, and we, now that today is Brexit Day, when we're outside, we will be able to decide more which way we go on this. But the Europeans, my bet is that they will over-regulate on AI, and that stifles innovation. It's really hard. I sometimes say that if you over-regulate at the moment, we don't know what to regulate and how, then you are doing AI with both hands tied behind your back. And in China, they're investing, and actually they have a pretty open market, but of course the autocratic government that can look at all the data. Now sometimes I want our governments to keep us safe. There are times when we want the governments to look at the data, but we have to, of course, build protections around that. But I think GDPR is a bit over the top, and we need to. It's over the top in terms of the amount of regulation you have to read through to understand it. It's a legal thing. It's this big, and startup companies can't afford the lawyers to check whether something is okay or not. So I could talk forever about this, but I know we can't. Tony's looking at his watch.
So
we said, by the way, this panel's going for the time it should. Just so you know.
So let's turn back to Jersey now, because you've described the state of the world. It's a little bit fractured, and things are evolving.
We still have a global internet, by the way. The technical standards are holding at the moment. If they break, if
Fingers
China
crossed.
or Russia, which they could, declare that they're going to use different technical standards, then all bets are off, and even your world's been troubled, Nick. But at the moment, the technical standards are holding, which is good.
So Jersey, historically, has always managed to punch above its weight. It's always been very, very entrepreneurial. And so if you look at the world now in terms of AI and how that field is evolving, what opportunities for Jersey do you see in that space?
Oh, this is the reason why I'm here. You have a small population, and you do everything that a big country's government has to do. And you have that, you can control the way you do that. You're autonomous about health, transport, tax systems are. So you can, as long as you protect people's privacy and make the data secure, so you need something like GDPR around it, you can make that data available to startup companies, researchers, to actually do some wonderful testing and pilot work. So I think Jersey should just become the startup place for the small tech company, startup for the world, basically, for AI experiments.
And you alluded to data, so this is an area that is of great interest, because obviously Jersey has great expertise in managing assets. And typically, we've been managing wealth. But many might say that data is a new form of wealth. And so, we have a lot of expertise in sort of looking at assets, putting them in structures, keeping them safe. And I know you've been doing some work in that in the UK as well.
We're going to in the AI review, we said that one of the hardest things to do, not technically, but in terms of persuading people to do it and managing it, was sharing data. And you can't do any of what we're talking about without being able to share data, big sets of data between very different types of organisations. Hospital data with transport data, with finance data, with all sorts of very secure data. And so data trust, we said, this idea of a legal framework, an ethical framework under which you could share data, we put that as our top recommendation. We thought, because it was something we felt the UK could lead the world on. And there are people picking up on that.
Absolutely. And so here, this is probably a good point to turn to Alexis, because Alexis is a homegrown entrepreneur and has been spending lots of time in the world of data governance. I'm very, very pleased that she's just had a white paper published just before Christmas on the concept of data foundations. So can you tell us a little bit about that, Alexis?
Sure. Delighted. I could go on about this for a very long time, but I will keep to the time. It's an area that's absolutely sparked my interest. The AI report was phenomenal, and it pointed to the governance model being really, really special in order to unlock data. We are producing exponential amounts of data every day. Even as we're sitting here, we're producing about 2 megs of ambient data every second, each one of us. But we actually analyze less than 1% of it, and we share even less of it. So actually, most of the data produced is actually unused. But if you think about data as knowledge, and knowledge should be shared, then on the assumption that you can do this responsibly, the challenge is really how do you facilitate that sharing? So we think that we have found one way to do this under the data trust banner, which is called a data foundation. And the time is really right for this idea because it's 2 halves. There's the legal innovation piece, which is the actual legal infrastructure. And then there is the privacy-enhancing technology, which is advancing as we go. So We know that a lot of countries now have task force and action groups all working and doing some really progressive and impressive stuff around data governance. And I actually think that Jersey could take a stand on this and lead on world-class standards for data governance. We have a track record of creating rules. We're very good at that, but rules make markets. And in this way, we actually could be very clear about our contribution to the world and to humanity if we can find a way to unlock data. So we've been really fortunate to be working in collaboration with the Web Science Institute with Wendy's team. And we've been working on responsible and sustainable large-scale data sharing, I hope you're still with me, where, in particular, looking at where competitors may be sharing data. So you might see that in a smart city if you've got multiple telecoms providers, that they won't share data with each other, but how do they actually do that and how do they govern that? So we took a bit of a different view to some of the work done in the UK and other countries where they started with an entity and retrofitted the data governance. We actually wrote a code of conduct, which was exemplifying the ethical core practices and then the 6 fundamental concepts of great data governance. And that when that finished, we actually know that to bring that alive, you really do need to find an entity that demonstrates that. And we have a really unusual law in the island called the Jersey Foundations Law. And that really seems to support this model very well because it works with transparency, collective decision-making, and importantly, accountability. And it allows for individuals to be part of decision-making. So for health, you may have a requirement within your data flows and your data management where you actually want to have a voice of the patients at the table. So they could actually form part of the council. So this is what we described in the white paper. It's available on the Web Science Institute.
We published it.
Yeah, where we collaborated, and that really kind of sets out how that works. And I'm happy to talk to anybody endlessly about it.
So that is tremendous because that sounds like an excellent opportunity for Jersey to pursue. And just in the final couple of minutes, maybe we'll turn back to you, Wendy, because you are also the UK AI skills champion. And in your view, what are some of the skills that we should focus on developing
Can I say something
here?
about that? I just want to say I think their work's brilliant. It isn't. I didn't know that when I was coming here that Alexis was going to be here. This is the first time we've met because she's working with one of our law professors. Who I obviously know, Sophie. Yeah. It's an all-women team. No way. And I think the work is truly profound. And I'm working with the Law Society and the Royal Society in London to produce a report on how to do data trust, and this is going to be a big part of that. And I think there's a big future in what you're doing. Well, but in the skills side, I am passionate about diversity. One of the major problems, we haven't talked about the threats, but one of the threats is bias, right? That algorithms learn on data. The data sets can be biased. We are all biased. We create biased data sets. And it's so important that the AI workforce is diverse. And we know in digital technology it isn't. And it's even worse in AI because at the moment we're taking mathematicians and computer scientists and the sort of typical not diverse pipeline and making them into AI coders. And that's not the way we want to build an AI industry. So I'm passionate about getting diversity into the AI workforce. That's gender, race, culture, age, disability, and I'm passionate about getting people into AI who don't want to be machine learning coders. And I've got this into the review. The UK was setting up a number of master's courses. They're called AI conversion courses, and these take people from a non-tech background into people that could go and work in the AI industry in its broadest sense. as legal advisors, as economic advisors, as auditors of data and AI algorithms, as people who understand human behavior and can check for biases in things. There will be a whole audit industry around AI that we have yet to see grow up. Right, we know how to do, well, we've learned over the centuries how to do audits of finance systems. We have to do audits of AI systems, and we don't. And we need a diverse workforce in that, and I'm passionate about that. And that's what I'm working with Tony. I really want to help bring that sort of training to Jersey so that you can retrain your current workforce and bring on board a whole diversity of people into this area.
Well, that's terrific. I think we are right on time.
Ah, it is 3,
It is
2,
1.
1.
So excellent.
Thank
you
you.
very much.